I feel like I had some really standout books this year, but my rating was only 3.7. So, did I just have amnesia? Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Lily and this is Lily in the Library. So today I wanted to talk to you guys about my best books of 2024. Prior to this, I'm sure you've already seen my worst books of the year. Let's follow it up with some positive energy and talk about all the books I loved and could not shut up about this year. As I said in my worst books, these are my opinions. We may have differing tastes, we may have differing opinions, and that is a-okay. We are all allowed to like what we like and dislike what we dislike. These are just my opinions on my channel, and I would love to hear your opinions at the end of the video. So I'm not going to waste a ton of time because I think I had like 24 or 25 books that I did want to mention. So I do have a top 10 best books of the year, but I have some honorable mentions that I want to get out of the way first. So all of the books that I'm going to talk about today are all 5 stars. I had 25 5-star reads for the year of 2024, which is funny because I feel like that's not a lot, even spread over 8 months. And yet I still feel very positive about my 2024 reading experience.
Delusion.
I am not going to go into the synopses of all of these books.
You're teasing me. Naughty, naughty.
I'm probably just going to give a brief description of how I felt about them, why they were a 5-star for me, and why they are, I don't know, on this list. Just because there's a lot of books I want to get through, and I'm not even listing all of my 5-star reads. I'm just like giving you 15 of them. I don't want this video to be super long. I kind of want it just to be quick, quick hit, and moving on to the next. So let's get started with the honorable mentions. My honorable mentions are in no particular order. So I want to start with The Widow's Husband's Secret Lie by Frida McFadden. When I read this book, I talked about how much I absolutely loved it. And this book is just so funny. It combines this sarcastic attitude with this thriller genre, and it just really did something for me, and I would love to read more books like this. So if you know anything else like this, if you've read this book, please leave it down below, because I feel like this is such a niche little genre, and that it's for me. That's where I need to be. But this book, it just, the entire time I'm listening to it, I was cooking Thanksgiving dinner, and it just made me laugh. I was laughing out loud almost the entire time I was listening to this book. It was just so good. Then we have Home is Where the Bodies Are by Geneva Rose, and this was really unexpected. I've never read anything from Geneva Rose before, and I was intrigued by the premise, and it didn't disappoint me. I thought the twist was amazing. The reveals were great. I enjoyed the writing. I enjoyed my time with this book so much, and I would highly recommend it. Then I have Guillotine by Delilah S. Dawson. And again, I had never read anything by Delilah S. Dawson, so this was my first foray into her writing, and I wasn't disappointed. I enjoyed it. It was a little bit slow to start, but I can completely overlook that for the simple fact that this book was so good, I ate it up in one sitting.
Into the mouth. Nice.
It was just fast paced and so many things being thrown at you, and it resembled a lot of my favorite thriller movies. I really enjoyed it. I would most closely compare it to Blink Twice, which came out last year as well. I feel like it was very similar to that, and I actually read this book first and then I watched that movie, and I got those very same vibes. But this one was just, I don't know, I just really enjoyed it. It was very graphic, it was very dark, it was super haunting, but I really enjoyed it. Then I'm going to cheat a little bit.
Stop it. Get some help.
Because I am going to mention Divine Rivals and Ruthless Vows as one. Just the series, or the duology as a whole, really stole my heart. I really loved Iris and Ronan, and yeah, I enjoyed the world that Rebecca Ross built for us, even though it was very much basically the real world with just a few fantastical elements. I feel like that's the kind of fantasy that I enjoy, where it's not so outlandish that you can't imagine it, but there's still like just some little magical elements, just some, I don't know, just a little pizzazz on regular life.
What?
I absolutely loved these books. I devoured them so quickly, and I have no regrets. I hope it gets turned into a movie or a series or something. Please do something with this. Then I have The Viscount Who Loved Me, which was my first 5-star read for the Bridgerton series. I think it's the only 5-star read so far. I am loving the series regardless. I don't think I've given anything less than 4 stars, but I believe this is the only 5-star I've had so far. And the love story just really spoke to me. I really, really loved the development of the characters, the development of this romance. It just, I don't know, it just really swept me off my feet and took my heart. And then my last honorable mention is Christmas Shopaholic by Sophie Kinsella. I adored this book. It had beautiful Christmas vibes. It was funny. It was suspenseful. It kept my interest from start to finish. Also, the main character, Bex, was extremely relatable with her shopping addiction and her family dynamic and stuff. And what really pushed it over the edge for me was the way her husband stood up for her and spoke about her. And throughout the entirety of the book, he doesn't really have this big role. He's not a major character despite being her husband. And then in the end, we get this moment where he is just, I can't even put into words what it is, but it's just like who you would hope your partner to be and how you would hope that your partner would defend you. And it was really just an amazing moment, and I felt proud of these characters. So yeah, for me it was such a great read, such a great Christmas time read, but a great read nonetheless. Okay, so coming in at number 10, I have Stay Awake by Megan Golden. Now, I believe this was before I started making any videos or anything. I do think that I have a review for it on my Instagram if you're curious. This was my first read of the year, first 5-star of the year, and I have no regrets about it. The thriller was great. I was hooked from the beginning, constantly wondering what's going on, what's going to be around the next corner. And yeah, I just didn't want to put this down. I felt like the pacing was great and the mystery, it was very I didn't know what was happening. Like, it didn't go the way I was expecting it to go. It was kind of crazy and I loved it. Then I have Listened for the Lie by Amy Tintera. Again, I discovered that when it's well done, I really do enjoy a podcast moment in a book, especially because I do consume a lot of audiobooks. So it is a great addition to the book and the information that's being presented to you when it is done well. This was one of those books. I loved the podcast element, but I just enjoyed the characters. I enjoyed the mystery. I did feel like the main character, I believe her name was Lucy, was a little bit relatable for myself. I enjoyed that she wasn't a perfect person and she was just kind of like living her life. It was also very interesting that as small as this town was, everybody was sleeping with everybody, but it's also not like that is an accurate picture of life in some places. So I know for some people it seemed unnecessary or unrealistic, but I can assure you it's not unrealistic. So for me, that wasn't a detraction from the book. I did enjoy following along with the story and finding out information as we went. The reveals were great to me, and the final twist, I loved it. Did not see it coming. And in my 8th position, I have All the Dangerous Things by Stacey Willingham. And many of you know that I absolutely love Stacey Willingham. She is one of my all-time favorite authors. I will read anything. She only has 3 books out, so I have read everything from her that I can. And I am patiently awaiting her next release. This book was so amazing. It was a little rough to read, especially in the beginning, because at the time I was a fairly new mother, and it really did trigger a lot of things within me. This is about a woman who has recently lost her son. I believe it's been a year. We're coming into the story a year after her son has gone missing. And because of this, kind of her whole life has come into shambles. So, just that in and of itself was very hard for me to stomach and read. And it, my heart felt for this character. And I think that's part of the reason why I rated this so highly, because it was so real. It was so relatable. And it was such a real depiction of motherhood, of the grief that you would feel, and just of, how your role in a relationship, in a marriage, in a family changes when you become a mother. I thought this was an amazing depiction of motherhood, but also of womanhood. Then I have Just the Nicest Couple by Mary Kubica in my number 7 slot. And it's funny because if you watched my worst of 2024, you'll know that she was also on that list as well. And I was so worried when I read that book that I wasn't going to love another Mary Kubica. And thankfully, I was extremely wrong. I loved this book so much. Again, I'm a big thriller reader. And I like to think that I can kind of solve things and kind of figure things out. But I think when I can't, when it's not obvious enough to me, and you can really get me, that makes a great read. Even if I do guess it, if the book is entertaining all the way through, I'm happy with that as well. This one was just like the other 5-star read I read from Mary Kubica. So I was so thrilled. The twists and turns had me going. I was just like eating this book up, couldn't wait for more. Oh my gosh, there was like basically imaginative scenario, and that really took me out. I was just like, oh my god. But yeah, this was amazing. Then in number 6, I have None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell, and this is my first Lisa Jewell book. And again, I have found another author that I really, really enjoy. I am super excited for her upcoming release this year and also to read more of her backlist. But this one, again, it is a podcast element in this book, and the podcast here was done amazing. I think this was like the second or third book I read this year, and it just really set the tone for me for podcasts in books. And I didn't really see any of these twists and turns coming. The ending really was kind of heartbreaking in my opinion, but also kind of like open as well. And I'm just yeah, I still often think about this book. And now we are getting into the top 5. So, in the number 5 slot, this should be no surprise to anyone, is the reappearance of Rachel Price by Holly Jackson. This is my first Holly Jackson book, and it's the only one I've read so far. I do have plans coming up to read more of her books. I definitely want to read A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, that entire series. I am so excited to read that, as well as watch the TV series, even though I've heard mixed reviews, that has come out on Netflix. Now, when I read this book, I could not shut up about it. It was so good. I was just shocked, like every few minutes by what was going on. The mystery was crazy. It was something I would have never even thought to expect. Oh my God. Holly Jackson had me going in so many different ways, thinking about so many different things. I could not believe it. And I was flabbergasted by the end. In number 4 is Love Letters to the Dead by Ava Delaria. Now, this is a little bit of a switch up from everything else that's been on this list, mainly because this is a YA, I guess, contemporary. I'm not really sure what you would classify this other than young adult. It's also funny because this is kind of, I would consider this a slice of life book, because we are literally following this young woman through a year of her life in letters to dead celebrities.
What?
I don't know what it was about this book that differentiated it so much from other slice of life books, except for the letters, because I enjoyed this book so much. I found it extremely hard to put this book down. I was listening to it on Audible, and I think I got a few letters in and immediately knew that I wanted to annotate this book and just be able to reflect on what I had read. And I found it so hard to wait for my physical copy to come while I was reading this book. But it was just, I enjoyed my time so much. It was such a heartfelt, like there was so much emotion, and you could really just see the development from the start of this book until that entire year passes. And I don't know, I really enjoyed going through this time with our main character and seeing what she was doing, how she was dealing with things in her life, and how she saw the world. I really enjoyed this one. Then in my third spot, I have We Used to Live Here by Marcus Cleaver, and when I tell you this book really messed me up, it messed me up almost as much as my number two book. This was so bizarre. It was such a weird book, and it did have an open ending, which I loved. If you have not read this book already, I would definitely recommend it if you like weird and unsettling things, because I feel like there wasn't really too much that was like prominently going on. I mean, there were a few kind of like scary scenes, but it wasn't like super in your face. It was very subtle things that were happening, and almost like if you didn't pay attention, you wouldn't quite catch it. And I love books like that. I love movies like that as well. I love any kind of media like that, but I especially love it in books because the way it's done, I have a very strong imagination, so it can take this small little clue or nugget of information and just run with it. And it makes my reading experience so great. And this for me was that kind of book. And I had so many questions. I was so confused at times, asking myself, why are we even here? What does this have to do with anything? And a lot of times when something doesn't resolve itself, or it doesn't find a way to make sense or connect with the main story, I guess, it's a little bit frustrating for me most of the time. In this situation, it just worked. For whatever reason, even though I ended this book with way more questions than I ever had going into it, I loved this book. And unfortunately, I do not have a physical copy yet, but I have heard there is more in the book, like more clues to things and more fun little things for you to physically do in the book, in the physical book. So I am excited about that, to finally get this book physically, whenever that is. But all that aside, even just listening to it on audio, I enjoyed my time with this book. It was so unsettling. I often think about this book, and it really got under my skin. Especially there's one part where our two main characters are at the hotel. If you've read this book, you'll know exactly what part I'm talking about, I'm sure. That literally, like, I was reading that part at night and it literally scared me. Like, it was so disturbing. I had tears in my eyes. Like, that, it messed me up. Okay, it messed me up. The book that's in my number two spot that messed me up even more than that was Incidents Around the House by Josh Malerman.
Emotional, damn it!
When I tell you I have not stopped thinking about this book since I read it, when I finished it, I reread like the last 5 chapters because it was that upsetting. This book took me on a ride, and I kind of thought I knew where it was going, and I kind of did know where it was going. And there was just there were some really unsettling things that happened in the beginning, and then it just kind of got more and more unsettling, but also scary and terrifying. And then in the end, I was devastated. it I don't think this book was meant to be sad, but it really and truly broke my heart. That was the first thing I thought of when I finished this book. It was heartbreaking. Like, and maybe it's because we're being told the story from an 8-year-old girl. Maybe that's why. But I feel like even if that wasn't the case, even if it was an omniscient narrator or we were being told the story from anyone else, the way this ended, because we go through these characters and you're rooting for them so hard, especially this little girl, and it just, like, even now it's making me want to tear up. This book broke my heart. Like, so many things happened in this book that were really messed up. And anytime a book can get under my skin like this and really get to me, really evoke emotion, and not just one emotion. I feel like all of them, because I was angry, I was scared, I was sad, I was heartbroken, I was worried. I felt grief, I felt loss, I felt trepidation, I felt terror, all of these things. And to me, that is just the writing. Oh, so good. And it made me second guess everything about Josh Malerman. So I'm excited to read more from him this year, because that book, even though I didn't like the other things that I have read from him, because I read House at the Bottom of the Lake, which was on my worst of 2024, and I read, I think, What Waits in the Woods or something, and I didn't really care one way or the other. I think I gave it 3 stars. But this book, it was just so good. I didn't want to stop reading it. I needed to know what was happening to this family. I had to know. And then when it was over, I just felt so hollow. I felt a lot of emotions and also just a numbness from this being the end. And I did have to sit with that for a little while. So for me, that was just such a great book. Content wasn't great, like what was actually happening in the book, but the book itself was just like, wow. And then I'm sure number one is going to be a surprise to no one. My top book of 2024. I know you've all been waiting for it. So you've been in suspense long enough. It is Sugar Baby Mine by Kayla Ryan. Now, this was an arc that I got, I believe, in November. And this is another book that I have not stopped thinking about, and actually compared it to a recent 5-star read that I had. This one made me have all the emotions again in a more positive light. This was a spicy romance, and it deals with sugar babies. It's hard. It's a lot to get into. I go into it a lot more in depth in reading vlogs and wrap ups, but this book was just, I ate it up. First of all, it was just so good. And I just enjoyed the journey. I enjoyed seeing these characters develop and fall in love. And the writing, the way things were written, was just so beautiful. It was so natural. It was so, like, oh, just everything about this book just made my heart so happy, so light. And the ending was no exception. So I really, really, really loved this book. And I have no doubts, no questions if this is my favorite book of the year. It absolutely 100% is. I loved this book above any other book that I have read this year. It was amazing if you like spicy romance, and this was a little bit of a shorter one as well. So if you're a fan of shorter, spicy romance books, I would highly, highly, highly recommend this book. If I could have given it 6 stars, if I could have given it 10 stars, I would have. I would give it all of the stars. But it was amazing. I absolutely loved this book.
Party.
So that is it, guys. Those are my best books of the year. What do you think? Do you agree with me? Did you read these books? Did you like them? Did you hate them? What were your top books of the year? I would love to hear in the comments. You can also find me on Instagram and chat to me there. So I hope you enjoyed finding out what my favorite books of the year were. If you haven't subscribed already, please consider subscribing to see more videos like this from me. And I think that's all I have for you guys today. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.